In the last module, we will concentrate on internal territorial organization of a state, and this lesson will be about the principles of administrative division. Any analytical activity which involves separating something into constituent elements is an important part of the thinking process. This is why, throughout history, states have also been divided into parts to more effectively manage social and economic processes. The administrative division seeks to meet two basic criteria in any state: regularity and hierarchy. The regularity implies that, on the one hand, the division refers to the entire territory of a state, and on the other hand, not a single part of the same hierarchical level refers to different administrative units at the same time. The hierarchy means there exist several levels of units of government, with units of a higher order divided into subregions of a lower order. In other words, the emerging political and territorial organization presupposes that a unit of a higher order cannot include the units of a lower order which are not hierarchically subordinate to it. The administrative division differs across the globe in accordance with such variables as fractionalization, heterogeneity, and congruence. The required degree of fractionalization remains a key debatable issue related to the administrative division. There exists a dilemma of the state's fractionalization. By reducing fractionalization, the state gives impetus to stronger centripetal forces and promotes more consistent management. However, it may disregard separatist sentiments. At the same time, by increasing fractionalization, the state authorities take heed of territorial heterogeneity and allow taking into account peculiar regional factors which increase centrifugal forces but impedes regional management. Thus, there is no one-size-fits-all solution depending on the size of the territory or the population of the region. Fractionalization is a compromise between the need to make some aspect congruent and consider territorial heterogeneity, which is unique in every state. States have on average 18 first-order administrative units, with the average territory size of 40,000 square kilometers and the average population of 2 million people. Although these parameters may differ a lot across countries, they should be taken as a reference point. From this perspective, North Macedonia, Slovenia, Greece, France, and Turkey have the highest degree of fractionalization, with the number of territorial units exceeding 50 and being close to 100. Pakistan and Bangladesh are the least fractionalized states, and they have only 4 and 6 regions respectively, despite the large population. However, when studying fractionalization, one must realize that a country can be divided into units which differ in size and population. For instance, Yakutia, Russia's largest region, is over 3,500 times larger than the smallest one, Sevastopol Federal City. Moscow, the most populated city, is home to 300 times more citizens than the Nenets Autonomous Okrug, the least populated unit. This parameter of heterogeneity describes the discrepancy between territorial units. It is especially pronounced in countries with directly administered cities. The analysis of congruence turns out to be by far more complicated than computing the other two parameters. It describes to what extent internal basic lines, political, historical, economic, ethnic, cultural, and many others, coincide with the territorial division. There are two types of regions: administrative units and autonomies. They enjoy a different degree of autonomy or self-governance. Administrative units are deprived of political status. They do not exercise any political power, and the executive bodies are merely territorial representatives of higher-level authorities. Nevertheless, executive functions of administrative units can vary greatly across countries. In turn, autonomies hold a political status. They are self-governing areas with their own budget and legislature. These entities are governed by their own executive bodies, operating within the region's power framework, in addition to the territorial representatives of the central authorities. In terms of the constitutional organization of a state, the distinction can be made between a unitary and a federal state. Let us consider two most typical approaches to their determination at the state level. They both rely on the status of constituent regions. The first approach sees the unitary state as the one with only administrative units, and the federal state as the one with autonomies only. However, a lot of unitary states with autonomies can be found on the world's political map, for example, Finland, France, or China. The second approach regards the federal state as the one with autonomies as its sole constituents. In turn, the unitary state can either comprise only administrative units or possess one or more autonomies as well. This viewpoint overcomes the mentioned problem, but two groups of states prove it is wrong. First, there are unitary states where all regions are autonomous. This is a new type of unitary state, a regionalist state, which arose in the 90s. This type includes Italy, Spain, and South Africa, for example. Second, there are federations with administrative units. Take, for example, the District of Columbia in the US and the Federal District of Brasilia in Brazil, 6 union territories in India, and many other examples. They are called federal territories. Thus, the territorial organization of a state cannot be classified with the help of the status of regions only. To distinguish between unitarism and federalism, one requires an approach based on the interaction between the levels of government, with the vector showing how power is exercised as the key criterion. As we know, any state is divided into regions and therefore has several vertical layers of power. Accordingly, power is exercised at different levels, the state one and the regional one. Relations between these vertical levels, just like those between the central and regional authorities, are determined by the principle of the state territorial organization. In a unitary state, the center governs regions, defining their composition and status. In this case, a region can be given the status of an administrative unit or autonomy. In other words, in a unitary state, power is in the hands of the central government. The central government may even grant autonomy to all entities. This transfer of power, called devolution, goes through the following stages: granting the population of the region or its parts the right of an exterritorial cultural autonomy, expanding authority of regional executive bodies, giving some regions the constitutional status of an autonomy, giving all regions the constitutional status of an autonomy, delegating more authority to autonomies, formalizing the autonomy's sovereignty and its right of secession, and even creating a supranational union of the state and its former autonomy. Federalism is the opposite of unitarism. In a federal state, subnational governments shape a state by partly sharing sovereignty with the central government. It is at the regional level that power decisions are made in such states, although they are empowered actors by other levels. The division of unitary states into symmetric, asymmetric, and regionalist is based on the constitutional status of regions. Unitary states comprising administrative units only are referred to as symmetric, for example, Japan. Unitary states, including autonomies along with administrative units, are asymmetric ones, like Ukraine or China. States made up of autonomies only are regionalist ones, Italy, Spain, South Africa. Along with the same lines, federations are categorized into symmetric and asymmetric or federalist ones. Federations consisting of autonomies only are called symmetric, like Austria or Argentina, while asymmetric federalist ones have both autonomies and administrative units, for example, the US or India. A federation can't consist of administrative units alone, as in this case there would be no entities to give rise to this type of the state to implement the principle of federalism. According to their genesis, federations are divided into classical and contractual. Classical federations arose when independent units merged into a single entity, pooling in their sovereignty and creating a new level of central government, like in Switzerland or in the US. Contractual federations used to be unitary, but at some stage the center and regions agreed on the division of power, like in Russia or Belgium. Federations are characterized by the following features. Regions have their own constitution, charter specifying the structure of regional government and its autonomy. Regions have their own legislative bodies to make policies within the powers constitutionally granted to them. Regions collect taxes on their own or receive a fixed share of federal taxes, which is distributed by regional executive bodies to implement policies they are charged with. There is a bicameral federal parliament in which the upper regional chamber ensures equal representation of the federal units. The chamber plays a decisive role in national decision-making, the matters of war and peace, budget, changes in the political structure, etc. Changes in the political system, like amendments to the constitutions, are obligatory coordinated with the regions. Regions do not have right of secession, a unilateral withdrawal from the federation. The confederation is a separate type of territorial organization of a state. It also relies on the principle of federalism, but its regions are sovereign rather than autonomous. Thus, such countries can be viewed as extremely decentralized federations, with autonomy largely preserved at the regional level. The central government is formed, often temporarily, to address specific tasks. Most frequently, these are related to security and the monetary policy, which does not imply any transfer of sovereignty to the center. Nowadays, one can't find such states on the world map, with the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina being the closest example. However, earlier they were quite common. Take, for example, Serbia and Montenegro or Senegambia. Let's view on the unitarism and federalism from one more point. Unitary states relied on the principle of subordination, which highlights the dominant role of higher levels of government in determining what powers to preserve and what decisions to transfer to lower levels. Federal states are characterized by the principle of subsidiarity, which holds that issues are done with at the lowest level that is consistent with their resolution, with the task requiring vaster resources performed at higher levels. For example, municipalities have enough resources to manage a primary school, but lack what is needed for a high school. That is why the regional level government is tasked with managing it. The region can run a higher school, but can't open a university, which necessitates the national level of government. In case of subordination, The subordinate is accountable to the superior, while in case of subsidiarity, the subordinate sets the superior tasks, which it cannot handle on its own.